You can bootstrap a software business out of your garage, but when you've got a piece of hardware, you need funding to take it to market. So it's, the riskiest part of any business. It's pre-revenue, you've got unproven commercial traction, you don't have much to go on, but you need the funding to go to market. And so there's that complete lack of that early stage funding in South Africa.
Nick, why do you do what you do?
I suppose I do because I love building things. I've always enjoyed building things. I originally studied civil engineering because I really enjoy creating something out of nothing. I think that's probably the fundamental driver behind what I've always wanted to do. It's like, how do we create something out of nothing? I think that's the real driver. I think my family is kind of got that in them. My brother is a farmer, and my sister's an artist. So we like creating stuff. We like building stuff, and that's kind of been the path that I've always been on. I like creating something out of nothing, and I think further to that, being in a position where we can fundamentally change and fundamentally impact the world that we live in a positive way is important. We need to be builders and creators and fixers of the challenges that we see around us.
Did you ever practice as a civil engineer?
Briefly, I had a bursary, so I had to spend a couple of years with my bursars, So I worked as a civil engineer for about 2.5 years, and then I got to the point got to try something different. So So Savant started in 2004. I had actually been working at a life sciences incubator called Acorn Technologies, focusing on biotechnology and medical devices. I'd come back from the US in the middle of 2002 going, I'm going to get into the VC world. I'd been studying in Chicago, and I kind of realized that this is the early stage space was where I wanted to be playing. And I came back to Cape Town going, all right, I'm going to get into the VC world. And South Africa, 2002, venture capital was HBD. That was it. There was nobody else, and it was probably towards a very, very poor time to be interested in VC. And found myself stumbled into Acorn Technologies and had a fantastic few years there, but realized that I needed to or wanted to expand beyond medical devices and biotech, which I've as a civil engineer I don't really have a lot of deep expertise in, and also realized that the critical mass for a specific thematic incubator in the South African environment was challenging. So try to persuade Acorn to expand and grow its mandate. And when that failed, I left to form Savant in September 2004. So it's been a journey. My colleague Kate Turner-Smith was also with me at Acorn, came along with me to kick off and do something new. So that was coming up for 20 years in 2024.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah.
And could you walk me through that early journey of Savant? Where did the funds come from, and who did you actually invest in?
So early days of Savant was very much around being a support organization, helping early stage innovators. One of the things that we saw while we were at Acorn was we have lots of very innovative and very great engineers and scientists solving real problems, real challenges, but who are very bad at everything around what they're doing. They're very bad at the basics of building companies, and we saw an opportunity to go and work with great scientists and engineers and helping them take their innovations to market. And those early days, we did a lot of consulting work to pay the bills, and we did, everything was bootstrapped. We didn't have any funding. We didn't have any funding to give out. We were it's very much around. Let us find some really interesting businesses, really interesting techies, and help them take their business to market. So we wanted to pivot away from what we were doing previously, which was trying to work with too many businesses and not really helping any of them, to getting to the point where we were working with working with fewer businesses, but actually helping them, actually getting them to the point where they were successful. And we were very fortunate to work with the likes of a Leert and a Snoozer and a Balancel and a Veggie Crisp, early days, like great tech, businesses that have gone on to do really, really good things. So the first 12 years of Savant, or 11 years, 12 years of Savant was purely support. We only really started getting into the funding side of things when we partnered with Tier to offer a Tier seed fund, as that was like the first step that we took. We badgered Tier for a long time to say, you provide seed capacity or seed capability to the universities, but what about innovators that aren't at universities? And eventually they gave us an allocation to invest in some businesses, and that's when went really well. We always, the challenges were always around how do we get those first checks into those businesses, and how do we take hardware and deep tech businesses from the point where they've got a product, but they don't have the wherewithal to take it to market. You can bootstrap a software business out of your garage, but when you've got a piece of hardware, you need funding to take it to market. So it's the riskiest part of any business. It's pre-revenue. You've got unproven commercial traction. You don't have much to go on, but you need the funding to go to market. And so there's that complete lack of that early stage funding in South Africa.
How did you increase the funds coming through after?
So we tried really hard to persuade a lot of other people to get involved in the early stage, particularly in the deep tech and hardware space. And when that wasn't working, and when over the years there were some initiatives that really spoke to what we were doing. IDC had a venture capital fund, which worked really well, which was just really starting to hit its straps, and then they changed strategy and they closed their VC fund, which is a big loss for us and a big loss for the country, I believe. Through the years there were some mechanisms available. We'd be able to raise funding on an ad hoc basis from various places, but there was never like consistent. This is where we go to if we need funding. So we got to the point where like nobody else is going to do a VC fund for hardware and deep tech. We're going to have to do it ourselves. So we started discussions with potential investors probably in about 2016. And the usual story, lots of people loved what we were doing, but way too risky and too scary for a lot of investors. And it was only when we got to present to the SASME fund in probably late 2018 that we found that fit. There was a clear mandate alignment between what we were doing and what SASME fund wanted to do, and they became our anchor investor in Venture Fund 1. And on the back of them investing brought the IDC and Tier along as well. So having that first investor coming along makes a huge difference. So we're very fortunate and very thankful for the vision that they had in supporting what we're doing and getting deep tech businesses and hardware businesses to market.
What were you doing differently that actually convinced that first investment from SME?
I think that the big difference was we were real in terms of we had a portfolio of businesses. So we've been working with companies that had demonstrated products. We were successful. Because we had the likes of a Leert and a Snoozer and a Veggie Crisp and a Balancel, businesses that we had dragged up to get to market. there was a realization that we weren't just kind of saying, give us money and we'll go find businesses. We had that portfolio. We had opportunities available to invest in immediately. And I think that's the big difference. And I think that's what investors really want to see is have some visibility of what is going to be invested in. Obviously our track record over many years was valuable. I think ultimately that's what led to SME Fund saying, right, we're going to support you.
And currently now in your portfolio of companies,
Yes.
Is it Pan-African?
Fund 1 has been purely South Africa. We've invested in 22 businesses that are all local, ranging from very early stage pre-seed, pre-revenue businesses to some more later stage businesses that are scaling both locally and internationally. So it's a very wide range of opportunities that we've put money into, but all South African businesses, but specifically looking to support businesses to get to the point where they're on the market as a starting point, but then getting them to that stage where they're ready to scale both locally and internationally.
And in terms of failures, were there any bad apples?
Always.
Could you describe?
Yeah. Look, I mean, it is the nature of particularly playing in the pre-seed space. There is so much uncertainty. There's so much uncertainty about every aspect of the business. Is your product going to work? Is the team right? Are you going to get your product market fit right? Have you got your pricing right? Absolutely everything is unknown when we've got a business that we invested in that has built 3 molds and they've all failed. So every time you build the mold, it's going to cost you a couple of $100,000, and for no fault of their own. It's just a very complicated mold, and there are no guarantees. So it's really, really hard, and we're kind of going, well, how do we solve for this business? How do we make it get to that point where it is going to succeed? So it's like finding a partner like Amnova who are going to make their product through additive manufacturing at scale to get them onto market. So it's the realization that if you're going to be investing in this stage, and if you're going to be investing in businesses that have the potential to make a difference, the potential to be quite differentiated, then you must accept that risk and be prepared that some of them are going to fail. I mean that is we could invest in businesses that are early but not that innovative and have less likelihood of failure, but then we won't find the really, really interesting ones. So I'm obviously we don't like failure, but we do have to accept it.
In terms of your investment thesis, if you could give me a summary of what you look for.
So Fund 1 has been South African developed science and engineering innovations, so deep tech and hardware. We have invested in businesses from AI platforms to medical devices, companies that are making a difference and have the potential to make a difference on the world that we live in, a positive difference. We want to build businesses that are meaningful in people's lives. Fund 1 has been pre-seed and seed stage, it's a challenging stage to invest at. Fund 2 is going to be a similar mandate, deep tech and hardware, with a green economy focus, a green economy lens, predominantly, and we will start investing across the continent. So we expect that the majority of investment will still be in South Africa. We specifically see that deep tech is clustered around strong tertiary educational institutions, and the strongest tertiary educational institutions on the continent are in South Africa, the likes of Egypt, Morocco, and places like that, and that's where we expect to see the majority of opportunities. Fund 2 will be still majority South Africa, but we will start exploring the rest of the continent and finding opportunities there. preferably in collaboration and co-investment with local investors. I suppose the other difference that we are open to is, while Fund 1 has been very focused on locally developed innovation, we are open to companies that are taking innovations from elsewhere and adapting them to the local challenges. Because we always feel that if you're solving a local challenge, there's a very high likelihood that that challenge is going to be replicated elsewhere, and you can then scale into other markets. So you don't necessarily have to be working with South African or local African developed IP, but there needs to be a nuance that talks to the local market.
What do you look for in founders?
That is a really good question. So the founder component is something that is always the biggest challenge in deep tech and hardware. The name Savant comes from the fact that we work with founders that are typically very good at their tech, to the detriment of some of the other things. So the core founders that we like to work with are very strong at their science and engineering, but it's important that they acknowledge where their strengths and weaknesses lie, and are prepared to bring in those skills that are going to complement what they're doing. So, Fund 1 has really been around finding businesses that have got strong founders from a technical and a very, very strong scientific, engineering, thematically capable founders, and then supporting them on the commercial side, helping them find those team members who are going to bolster the commercial side of what they do, and that's necessarily, I believe, at the pre-seed and seed stage. I think Fund 2 is going to be more focused on finding businesses that have formed those teams already, from an incubation perspective. And if you look at Savant continues to be very active in the incubation and the acceleration side of things. We've established a program particularly focused on working with businesses to get them to the point where they're investment ready. And that is a lot around ensuring that they understand the roles and responsibilities and who they need to form a team that is investable. So that's it's been very successful so far, and there'll be some announcements soon around the build program for 2024. We're very happy to have US aid support us on that, so that's going to be help us grow that program quite significantly. And the goal of that is to ensure that businesses that come out of the build program are just that much more mature in terms of their investability.
Final question.
Yes.
What's your goal with Savant?
I want Savant to make a difference. I think we have a lot of challenges. The globe, the world, the society that we live in has got significant challenges. I think that South Africa is very good at exposing challenges. Why live in South Africa? Because you've got lots of problems to solve, which is great. But we want to make meaningful differences in the challenges that we see. And if you live in South Africa, power, water, recycling, these are all very real challenges in our lives. And if we can build businesses that are going to address these challenges, then we're making a difference. We're building something valuable. And it's valuable to society, but also to the investors that we work with. So, we always say, we want to do good by doing, do good for society at the same time, giving our investors return on investment. So, that's really what I want to be able to do.
Nick, thank you. Thank you for your time and your valuable information.
Yeah.
And also the impact that you're making with Savant, not only in South Africa, but in future in Africa. So thank you for that.
Only a pleasure.